Hey humans, how's it going? Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 411, and my guests are author Bonnie Thies and author-journalist Robin Flanigan. Together, they wrote a book called Climbing Out, an adventure in rediscovering life after loss. It's about three-time cancer survivor Bonnie after the sudden death of her husband. True story, she decided to summit Mount Kilimanjaro, and in doing so, she discovers the healing power of friendship, self-love, and resilience. It's a great book. I really enjoyed reading it. Shout out to my bestie, Ellen Severe, who has a book club, and Bonnie and Robin were a part of that. Ellen decided to read the book in her club, and Bonnie and Robin did a Zoom-in conversation. Really cool that they do that. So if you're looking for a new book in your book club, they are open to that. Really cool. Robin's also the author of the celebrated book M is for Mindful and 100 Things to Do in Rochester. Big news, I just got back from the Portland Horror Festival in Portland, Oregon, where I showed my film The First to the audiences there, and it was well received, and I came home with the Trompe l'Oeil Award for the film. Really exciting. It's a special effects award in service to the film. So in other words, the art, I think it literally translates something about the trick of the eye. So it's an award that honors using special effects in service to and a twist of the story, that kind of thing. So very cool. Huge shout out to Brian and Gwen Callahan, who are the founders of Portland Horror Fest, and to all of the people that were there. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun, and the movies I saw were incredible. I saw so many fantastic movies. Check out my social media because I go into detail about everything, and yeah, very cool. All right, general stuff. I'm on Patreon at Susan Ruthism. You can check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you get your music. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, find Patreon at patreon.com/Susan Ruthism, and it helps keep Hey Human ad-free, which is great. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening. Be well, be kind, be love, and here we go. Bonnie Thies and Robin Flanigan, welcome to Hey Human.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It may get a little confusing for our listeners, but hang in there and hopefully it'll all work out. I learned of both of you because my best friend Ellen has a book group, and their group did the book Climbing Out about Bonnie's experience climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And there's a lot of backstory. Before I get into any of that, what I like to do on this show is ask my guests where they grew up, what shaped them as people, and then go from there. Robin, where are you from?
I spent my first 8 years in Maryland, but from 9 to 17, I lived in Sedona, Arizona. So I feel like that's where I'm from, my formative years. I started writing, though, when I still lived in Maryland. My first story I wrote at 6. It was called Santa Claus and the Magic Pencils, and I still have it in a box in my attic somewhere. But I've been writing ever since. I always say I definitely don't take for granted the fact that I always knew what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be a writer for a living. And so then when I went to Sedona, I guess part of my entrepreneurial spirit, I used to collect cans in my wagon and turn them in for money. I was a member of the Sunshine Sales Club, which meant I went door to door and sold gift wrap and greeting cards and got $1 per item. And I just was always looking for ways to, I don't know, have to kind of make money and be on my own and be independent. And even though I grew up in Sedona with all those gorgeous rocks, I did not come from a family of hikers. So I did not start hiking until I left Sedona. Luckily I go back every year, and now I'm kind of trying to make up for lost time.
Bonnie?
Well, I grew up in a very small town in the southern tier of New York State, and the name of the town is Canisteo. Our claim to fame in Canisteo, we have we spell up on a hill. The town Canisteo is spelled in evergreen trees. It's very charming. It is the world's largest living sign. Grew up in a medium-sized family, grew up in the 50s and 60s, and grew up with a mom and dad, 2 sisters, and a brother. There were 4 of us. We lived right in town, literally 2 houses away from our school. With it being a small town, and in that era, everyone is around you. We had a lot of family, aunts and uncles and cousins who also lived in town, and you just sort of grow up with everybody, even your school people. People get close. I mean, in just a couple of weeks, I'm going to be heading down to celebrate my 55th high school graduation with a lot of friends who I still stay in contact with. And I mean, I currently live about 60 miles north of that town, so I didn't move very far away.
Did you always stay within the proximity of where you grew up, or did you ever live elsewhere?
I always did stay in this area.
Clearly, that's where you met Bill?
Yes. Yeah, I did not meet Bill in Canisteo, but I met Bill. Bill and I worked together up in the Rochester, New York area.
Robin, did you know about Bonnie being a widow and her experiences yet, or is that something that came later?
I definitely knew part of the story, but there's no way I knew as much as I did after I grilled her when we were doing interviews after the climb. It was a very, very long, in-depth process, and she exhibited a lot of patience working with me.
Was that hard for you, Bonnie, to reopen those memories and to talk? I know that you like to keep his memory alive, obviously, but was it hard for you to really go back and talk about the night that he passed away?
That particular piece, of course, was very hard. You know, and through much of Robin's asking questions, we both cried a lot. We had a lot of moments of that, but absolutely, you know, we are talking about the night that my husband Bill died and how he died. That's certainly hard to talk about.
Yeah, you both had experiences with cancer, and Bonnie, you had it twice.
I did. I had experienced breast cancer twice. Yeah, just a few years, actually, about 4 years before we climbed Kilimanjaro.
And you're totally cancer-free now.
Since then, I actually had one more cancer experience. Once again, breast cancer. Right this minute, I am cancer-free.
Good. Yeah. And Robin?
I was married at the time of our climb, and my husband was also a cancer survivor at that time. He has since had it 3 times as well. It has, yes, affected us both pretty significantly. And we actually met before the climb. We met while training for the climb.
The two of you?
Bonnie and I met about a year before we climbed Kilimanjaro. In 2008, we climbed. So we met in early 2007.
And this was a group of people, the support group for people who have had some sort of experience with cancer.
Yes, our entire group, either someone had cancer or they were climbing for someone close to them who had cancer. So as Robin just mentioned, as we were getting ready for Kilimanjaro, we would meet about once a week, sometimes more often than that, but we would meet about once a week and get together as many people as possible, and get together mostly in our local area, local Rochester Finger Lakes area, and that's how we trained.
Let's talk about the decision to climb a mountain like Mount Kilimanjaro. For both of you, what drew you to that decision, which I consider insane?
I'm a one and done, so I sort of consider it insane too at this point.
Yeah, many people do. Many people do. Well, for me, it was my husband Bill and I. Outdoors was what we did. When our daughter was growing up, we canoed, we hiked, we cross-country skied, and we camped. And so we did a lot of that stuff. And then as we got older, we got a little more adventurous, and we went up to Alaska a couple of times on a canoe trip, a rafting trip. We did a 10-day backpacking trip in Greenland. We did all of the big trips through a local outfitter. So we became very good friends with our local outfitter. After Bill died, his name is Rick, and Rick would call me every few months just to check in and see how I was doing. And he would always end with, whenever you're ready to go on another trip, let me know. I'll take good care of you. So I had been looking at his brochures and kind of decided on this going to Romania, and that looked like that would be a safe. I would be in a hotel room or a bed and breakfast room, and it wasn't camping, but it was climbing, and it was doing a lot of hiking, and so I thought that sounded good. The day that I got ready to call him and tell him that I was gonna sign up for that, I happened to pick up his brochure, and I hadn't noticed before a letter that he had on the back of the brochure, and it talked about how everybody's affected by cancer, and his bottom line was, I'm not sure what this is going to look like, but at some point we will all end up at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro together. So I picked up the phone, I called him, he answered, and I said, Rick, I just read your letter. I have no idea what you have up your sleeve this time, but count me in. Oh, and by the way, I want to go to Romania too.
So you still got to go to Romania.
I did that about 8 months before the Kilimanjaro climb.
And how old were you at that point?
57.
All right. And yeah. Robin, what was your inspiration?
My story is a little bit more boring. I was sort of a tag along. My husband was Patrick. He has a brother named Matt. Matt worked for the American Cancer Society at the time and was good friends with Rick and was going on the trip as well. And so Patrick decided to go on the trip because his brother was going. At the time, I wasn't going with them. And then I think just over time, it just sounded more exciting. I like adventure. I like to hike. We both loved to travel. So it sort of was more like it checked off all the boxes for me. And I thought it would be a good experience to have.
During this time, you were working on your own memoir. Is that correct?
Okay, right. So I was working on a memoir. I had a tough time with infertility. I'd had 4 in vitro fertilization processes and 3 pregnancies that I lost. And so I was kind of writing about that, but I was kind of staying in the sadness of that and struggling with that. I was keeping alive something I was trying to move on from. And after we got back, Patrick and I were having breakfast, and he said, why don't you write about Bonnie? And so it really is because he said that this even exists. And that was a Saturday morning. And as I write in the author's note of the book, I thought about it, waited till Monday, called Bonnie, and just kind of spewed this is what I want to do, da-da-da-da-da. It's just kind of spewed it out. Talked about how we had been eating breakfast when the idea came up. And Bonnie said, Robin, on Saturday morning, probably around the time you had breakfast, I was praying and I said, God, I think it's time for me to tell my story. And Robin, God brought you to me. And we just started crying, or I did. I started crying, and then I was kind of laughing to myself that this thing that seemed so selfish had turned into divine intervention, sort of. But I feel like it was meant to be.
It's about really being present in one's life, so you recognize those moments, because either one of you could have eschewed that, but you moved forward. And Robin, it's interesting, you talked about being mired in a way of your grief, and I'm so sorry for all of that. I can't even imagine, but I'm happy you have a daughter.
Yes. Thank you.
But there was something that I wrote down in my notes of that Bonnie had said, you have to stop sinking. I thought that line was so powerful. And so, Bonnie, you as well kept seeing the sinking end of the ship instead of the forests and the trees and the island you were heading toward. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
The sinking part, and I think that's when you have, especially a sudden loss, I think that's pretty normal. You go down, you have to. I honestly think that's what saves you, is because you have to retreat for a certain amount of time. Truly, with something like that, there's no question that one of the things that I often said that probably kept me going is it puts you in shock. And it's the shock that gets you through a lot of things. And it's almost like as you're coming out of that, and I maintained it took me close to 18 months to really move out of that. And it's not as though I lived in sadness all that time. I didn't. I had wonderful people around me. I had a wonderful family around me. I had people who took care of me, people who I could bounce off of whenever I needed them. But I think the idea of me saying that I was sinking, I think that's almost when I got to the point where I began to come out of that mode of shock, when I began to feel things again. Like I said, I don't want anybody to get the impression that, I was just sad and horrified, through those 18 months. I wasn't, but it did take me that long took me, and I think I mentioned in the book, it took me 18 months to open up that closet door and go through his clothes. And when I did, it was a fun day, because I threw on a couple of his shirts that I knew he loved. And I could talk to him about it. And I could not have done that too much sooner than. And that being said, we're all different human beings. I mean, some people, that's certainly not the way that they would do it. One of the things that I often like to say about the book is not a how-to book. The book is a book of hope. It's not a book that everyone is going to do it the same way.
I think it definitely reads hopeful. It didn't seem mired in sorrow at all. Firstly, I think that the arc of the story is so well done. The pacing and the arc of the story, just as a person that likes to read books.
Yes. Robin did an amazing job with that.
Yeah, it's really great. What I think is so important, even if people are thinking, I don't want to read a book about climbing a mountain, I don't care about that. It's really not about that. I mean, it's the metaphor. It's the Everest that lives within all of us, although it was Kilimanjaro. But that's the thing. And grief treats everyone differently. And you never know when it will rear its head. Grief can come on. We've all experienced grief, and we know that you might be totally fine for months or even years, and then something, a smell or a look or whatever it is, will set you off, and then you just have to be in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can't deny it. I mean, I love what you just said, because you do have to be in it. You can't deny it, because that's when you will spiral back down again.
Yeah, it doesn't release if you deny it. You have to get it out, I think. I mean, you don't have to. Everybody's on their own journey. But to me, it feels like if you push it back down, it's just going to cause other problems. Robin, what did you learn about grief through this?
Oh, wow. What did I learn about grief? Well, I think what I learned the most is Bonnie is one of the strongest, if not the strongest person I've ever met. Her attitude, the way she approaches things. Separately, there's kind of a tangential thing happening here in this particular question you're asking me as far as what I learned. But with my relationship with Bonnie, so my next book I'm working on is a research-based memoir on religious trauma. And as you know from reading the book, it has a lot to do with her faith. And there is no way, 20 years ago, you couldn't say the word God without me leaving the room in tears. And so here's a woman who we talk about faith a lot. I write about it a lot, and she wasn't threatening once. So she's somebody who lives her faith. And so I know this isn't really about grief, but I feel like what I learn about it is just her approach. So I think that, I haven't gone through anything like she has. I haven't lost a partner, in the same way or even remotely the same. But I think what I learned is that you can still be strong and loving toward the person you lost and keep that person alive. And there's just so much more that I would look to her for how to, I guess, cope with my own feelings. There was never any doubt. There was just gratefulness. I don't know, Bonnie, you might say I'm not hitting the mark here, but.
Oh, you're hitting it. Yeah. No, you've got it.
Yeah. I could only hope to be that strong.
I think some people feel grief and shame around their grief. Bonnie, you talk a little bit about your feelings around falling in love again. And so it's interesting. It's an interesting trap we can get in as humans where we start feeling grief and mad at ourselves for letting go of our grief. What does that mean? Are we disrespecting people? And then that becomes its own vicious circle. How was that conversation in your head, Bonnie?
I think I never felt that at all. And one of the things that I am blessed to be able to say is, when Bill died, of course, it was very sudden. But looking back on what we had and what we did and how we lived our lives, I had no regrets. So to me, that was so important. One of the things that Susan, I say this a lot because there's been a number of iterations that Robin and I went through on the book. So I'm not sure if this was in the book or not. It may have been. But one of the things that made me particularly feel good, my tent mate, who is Sue in the book, we hiked every Friday together, and oftentimes Saturdays too. But every Friday she and a few other people would come out to my house and we would hike. And so as we hiked along one day, when I first began to date Jim, she just very quietly said, that this means that you had a really good marriage with Bill. And I had just truly never thought about that in that light before, that would kind of reflected that one from the other. And that certainly, that brought me hope, because that really was early on when I was thinking, what am I going to do with it? But I never felt guilty. I had no guilt. I had no reason to have guilt. I continue to think that somehow Bill, with God's help, still looks over me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that the people that we lose throughout our lifetime have a hand. They sit there, they drink their coffee in the morning, and they say, "What are you going to do today?"
Yeah, I love that.
Yes, but they don't watch us go to the bathroom, unlike what happened to you when you were on Kilimanjaro. Let's get into the mountain. Talk about what that was like.
I would start in the front, but end up in the back probably every day. Bonnie, you were sort of like that. We would kind of bring the group up from behind. We were slow.
I was in the back all the time.
And there are about 30 people?
In our group, there were, what was it, Rob? Maybe 25-ish?
24-ish, 25-ish, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in our group. In total, there were almost 40 of us. We were on 3 different trails.
Wow. So what was that like? What are you saying to yourselves in your minds as you're doing this to keep you going one foot in front of the other? Because I'm sure you were exhausted at points. You talk about it.
I mean, most especially, maybe we'll start close to the top, but most especially, I mean, when you begin, truly from the first step, I was thinking, I don't think I can do this. I mean, there were some small mountains that I tried to climb back home that I couldn't do. I went up to Maine and tried to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I couldn't do it. I got about a half a mile from the top. I knew I couldn't go any further and turned around, and that was okay. But, and then there were a couple of other things that I attempted to do and couldn't do. So for me, our very first morning that we woke up on the mountain, I woke up, I ran into the woods, and I threw up. And I thought, oh my God, Rick is going to send me back down. I was worried. I mean, I was sick. I threw up a couple of times, and I managed to get some really weak oatmeal down me, and that stayed down. It turned out I was just too excited about taking my vitamins in the morning. I took my vitamins with nothing in my stomach. And then I packed my stuff up and rolled up my sleeping bag and got everything ready. And that's what made me sick. Because after that, I never actually got sick. I never had a headache. A number of the people in our trail had a lot of stomach problems. I feel like I probably ate some of their food because the food was good. I was eating a lot, so I was good there. Certainly the most difficult day was summit night. And summit night, you start at about 11 o'clock at night, and you continue to walk just ever so slowly. I mean, one of the first things that happened to me on summit night was my tent mate Sue actually got sick before we left, and she got all herself back together. She tried to climb. We didn't get very far, and I walked off the path with her. Rick literally took me and pushed me back on the path. And I cried because we had gotten so close, and it was a moment. And then at one point up there, we stopped for a break, and our porters had glass cups for us, and we were drinking tea in glass cups, and it just felt surreal at the time. And then as we continued to go, I would pass one of our very young 23-year-old athlete, young man, who he was just getting so sick. And so I would say in my head, I'm not sick, I'm just very tired. So at one point I somehow got lost from the group, but somehow Rick and our African guide, Yusuf, found me. And at that point, I looked at Yusuf and I said, could you carry my pack? I said, I can't do this. So he not only carried my pack, but he stayed with me until we got to the very top. And he never, when we got close to the top, probably about 45 minutes away, he just took my arm and he never let go. So it was literally and truly one step at a time. And I've said so many times, it was not my physical body that got me up there. It was my psyche, because I know I could have given up at any time. From that experience, I know there's been, not big things like Kilimanjaro, but I know there's been things in my life since then where I think, should I just stop? Should I give up at this point? And there's been times when I think, no, I'm going to keep going, see what happens.
Step by step.
Step by step. Yeah. One step at a time.
The guides and the porters, they're like lungs on feet. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. They are amazing.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. Robin, what about you?
So a few weeks before we left for Africa, I had some pretty severe autoimmune issues going on, and they were trying to rule out lupus, and I didn't even know if I could go. And I was on a medication that when we landed and got to Africa, I didn't realize you're not, because of the temperature, the medication, it made my body swell. And then this was the night before we were about to leave. My boots didn't fit. My legs and my feet were swollen. I thought, all this, a year of training, I'm here, and now I can't climb. So we have some doctors in our group, and somebody lent me support pantyhose, and we put my feet on a whole bunch of duffel bags that were stacked high, and I slept with my feet as high as possible. And the next morning, everything had kind of gotten back to normal, and I was able to put on my shoes and leave for the mountain. And I stopped taking the medicine. So I at least got on the mountain, which was great. And then pretty early on, around at 13,000 feet, I started getting pretty sick, pretty nauseous. And at that time, the highest mountain I'd ever climbed was Mount Marcy in the Adirondacks, and that's only 11,000 feet. And Kilimanjaro is over 19,300 feet. So I knew that I still had a really, really long way to go. Just taking it slow. By the time we got to summit night, I hadn't eaten in about 3 days. I had had a couple bites of granola bars, but couldn't eat any food. I hadn't slept in more than 24 hours. And it's just, you kind of are running definitely on, I don't even know if it's adrenaline. I don't know what it is, but you're running on something. And oxygen is 50% of what you're used to. There was a time on summit night where I saw Rick look at me, and I saw doubt in his eyes, and that fired me up. I was the same as Bonnie, I was like, there's no way he's going to tell me to turn around. So I kept going, and the last few hours, I kept thinking about why we were there, raising money for people with cancer. And I just kept repeating to myself, my pain is finite. My pain is finite, because I knew that people who have cancer, they don't necessarily know that their pain is finite. And I felt so grateful that I was in that position. So that's what got me to the top. Oh, and at Stella Point, which is, you get to a place called Stella Point, which is the rim, but you have to walk another 45 minutes to get to the highest point on the top, where the markers are and the flags and the congratulatory sign. But when you're at the rim, we saw the curvature of the earth at sunrise, which is a sight you just never forget.
Wow. Incredible. Bonnie, what'd you think when you got up there?
It's so hard to put it into words. It's so hard to put in words. It was because, as Robin said, it was a cancer climb. And so one of the things that we all had is we all had a plastic poster, if you will, that we could fold up and put in our backpack. And we had countless people sign that poster. As a group, we raised over $200,000 for cancer just on that one climb. And some of the messages, and that's the other thing that you think about as you're walking up there, are some of the messages that people have put on there. Some are in memorial to people who have died. Some are to honor people who are currently struggling. That truly was something that was so important. We all got it out and had our pictures taken with that up there. Yeah, it really is hard to put, and I know this is trite, but it's very hard to put in words. You've been working for a couple of years towards this goal, and you're there, and it's one of the most amazing feelings I have ever.
Having that experience, I'm sure you had to pack very lightly. Was there something that this is a two-prong, I guess. What did you think you couldn't live without and then realize that you could live without on that journey, and vice versa? What are you so glad you had with you?
Bonnie, do you want to go? Because you had your scrimshaw necklace.
I did have my scrimshaw necklace, and that was a necklace that had been given to me on our Romania trip by our guide, Steve. I had mentioned before that Rick heads up Pack Paddle and Ski. His brother Steve was the leader for our Romania trip. Steve had been over to Kilimanjaro a couple of years before then. And so he and I were doing a lot of, nice talking about Kilimanjaro, and he had a scrimshaw necklace around his neck. And he talked a lot about that. He said that he had not taken that off since he got it when he was at Kilimanjaro. When I got home, he had put that necklace in the bottom of my bag with just a beautiful note of how he wanted to give that to me, and it was time to pass it on. So I wore that the entire thing. That was very important. I don't know that there was anything that I had that I felt like I didn't need. I mean, we were blessed and lucky that the porters carried our big bags. We had to carry day packs with our rain gear and snacks and things like that. But the porters truly did the heavy lifting for us to get things up.
Yeah. Robin?
This was so long ago. I know more about what Bonnie had than what I did. But I think the only thing that I'm thinking of now is I brought a journal so that I could take copious notes of my whole trip, and that lasted maybe a day. I just didn't have it in me I was too tired. I guess I could pretend that I was too present, I could make it about that, but I don't think that's the truth. I think that I was just too tired to even bother recreating the day every day. So I thought I couldn't live without it, but I guess I could.
Did you miss anything from home?
My daughter, she was 2 at the time. My mom had them for 17 days or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. How did y'all maintain privacy on this trip? Was that a very humbling thing of trying to, just being a human being and all of its foibles, special smells and things?
Special smells. Well, I mean, the one thing, and I don't know that I think this was in the book, that even, like during the day when you have to, because you do have to drink a lot. If you don't drink, you are going to get it. So, you're constantly drinking. And so at least for a lot of us, we're constantly peeing. And when you do, the one thing you cannot do, you can pee on, off the trail, but you cannot leave any toilet paper any place. So we had 2 plastic bags in our pockets every day, one with clean stuff and one with not clean stuff. So that was really something. I mean, I think most people who were on the trip had been previous hikers or campers, and you're kind of used to, of course, here there's no wood for the most part. Once you get up to a certain elevation, there's no woods to go into anymore. So you try and find a rock to hide behind, or, and then you're just hopeful that when you get to camp, they had a toilet tent for us, one of the tall, narrow tents, and they did have a toilet tent. So there we could go in and do our big business. So you hoped that things would work out in the body so that you could, either do that in the morning or do that when you got to the camp at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely not a trip to be on your period for, I guess, too.
Right.
A bad idea. You had to really time things.
Right.
Robin, what about you? Did you have any moments where you thought, my shyness is, or, my modesty is taking over?
No, I just remember like pack animals. We would all kind of find the biggest rock and all go at the same time.
It's hilarious. If you could sum it up, one word of how that trip changed you, what would it be?
I'm going to say friendship. Friendship, true love and friendship. I mean,
I love that.
we still have friends who, we began training with these people. We still hike with them. 2, 3, 4 days ago, Robin, a bunch of us was out hiking.
The first Saturday of every month, the group still gets together and goes for a hike all these years later. Mm-hmm.
I love it.
I mean, one thing that has just stayed in my heart forever, this was definitely in the book, but when I came back down, I was beyond exhausted at that point. And I'm thinking in my brain, I hope I can unzip the tent to get in there. And I somehow did. I got in there. And my friend Sue, who wasn't able to do the climb, of course, she was in there. And the first thing she did was take off my boots. And by the time she got to my second boot, I was sound asleep. That makes me cry every time I think about it. That's the kind of love and friendship that we've learned to receive and to give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Robin? What's your one word?
Perspective. It's helped me now, no matter what I do, I just tell myself, well, I climbed Kilimanjaro. I can do this.
Yeah. It's a major. Do you think either of you will climb another mountain?
I'm a one and done.
Yeah.
I mean, another mountain, yes, but not this high. Not this high.
Probably the same for me. Not this high. I mean, we went, and that was in the book too. Jim and I took a trip to Base Camp Everest, and that was amazing. That was completely different kind of climb from Kilimanjaro. Very different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, we're in our 70s now, and I mean, we're still very active. We still do a lot of things, but probably not going to climb Kilimanjaro again.
Is Rick still giving tours?
He does. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to interview Rick. When I was reading about Rick, I thought, now that's somebody.
Oh, yeah.
He would be great.
One of you has to introduce me to Rick because I want to interview him.
Okay.
He's a character. Oh, we can do that.
Yeah.
He's a character.
He sounds like he's had a lot of interesting life experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you both so much for being on the show. Tell everyone where they can find Climbing Out.
They can find it on Amazon. It's Climbing Out, an adventure in rediscovering life after loss.
And thank you both. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Susan, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time and let us tell a little bit about our story.
Absolutely.
It is a lot of fun.
I'm going to manifest with you that it gets made into a movie. I think it would make a great movie. Why not?
Great. You'll get credit.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
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 Bye, y'all. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.